Hello and welcome to the You've Got This Girl podcast, a space for celebrating all that we are as women, our struggles, our journeys, and our victories, sharing knowledge and inspiring stories of women accomplishing incredible things. I'm your host, Marilyn Brown, and my guest today is Lindsay Gray. Lindsay is a competitive powerlifter, coach, mother of two amazing girls, and all-around powerhouse. I found Lindsay's content after having my daughter, and her messages about women in strength training really resonated with me. We connected, and she was instrumental in getting me back under the bar and rebuilding my confidence in and love for the gym. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into powerlifting and what you love about it?
Sure. So I started fitness at a super young age. When I was 16, I got certified in spinning, and really I accidentally fell into it. I was taking strength and conditioning. I started working in a gym, and it was such a small gym that you had to do something else. Like, you couldn't just work there. You had to do, an additional something. So I chose group fitness, and I just fell in love with it. I loved the energy. I loved that I could command energy from and for people. So that kind of got my attention, and that's where it all started. And fast forward to training, I never stopped training from there. I have always lifted. It's always been a passion of mine. I've just always enjoyed it. So, and working in gyms, I think, probably had a huge impact on that, because you're just there all the time. So but the opportunity to see lots of different kinds of fitness, I think, was a great little piece of the journey for me, because it kind of helps you understand that, like, hey, they might be doing something different than me, but that's because their goal is different than mine. And then falling into powerlifting, I just signed up. I knew I wanted to compete in something, but I did not enjoy bodybuilding from a competitive aspect. That's how I trained for many years, for a good decade before I started powerlifting. I was just doing bodybuilding splits, but I knew that, like, in my heart, I didn't have any interest in, like, stepping on stage. I prepped for a show for that for like a couple weeks, and I was like, this isn't fun to me. It's all kitchen. And I think that the level of discipline that it takes, I have a huge respect for, but I didn't enjoy it. And then when I found powerlifting, a friend gave me a hand-me-down program. I followed it some of the time. I had no idea what I was doing, and I just showed up, and I had so much fun. So I was like, this is it. This is for me.
Yeah. There's so much to be said for the fact that if you enjoy it, you'll do it.
Yeah.
And that's, I've experienced that myself. Is like, it becomes not a chore. It becomes something that's part of your everyday, your mental health, the things that you need to do to show up as you every day.
Exactly.
And so along those same lines, one of the topics that you've shared about that really resonates with me, and I think a lot of other women, is this concept that motherhood is, an important and beautiful layer of who we are, but we are also allowed to exist and thrive outside of that role.
Yes.
And so can you expand on that a little bit?
So I noticed that it was a feeling, I think it comes from within us first, because I think realistically, mothers are some of the most important people in society, but they're also some of the most heavily judged. And you start to, like, receive that, and then you just feel as a mother, like, as soon as you become a mother, or as soon as you're pregnant, you just feel like you're under a microscope. Everyone wants to know what you're going to do about this and that, and, well, are you going to breastfeed, are you going to bottle feed? It's just like you're always under a microscope. So I think that it's just really important to remember that you exist outside of that microscope, and people are always going to have an opinion, and that goes beyond just being a mother. But it's like people are so vocal about what we should be doing and who we should be, that it starts to make you feel selfish if you do anything that doesn't involve your children. And I've always, like, first you internalize that, and you're like, it's almost like I found myself making an excuse for why I needed to do something for myself. And that's when I think I realized, it's like, this is a problem. Like, I am a grown woman. If I want to go to the gym, I'm allowed to do that. I'm allowed to do things that contribute positively to my life, and ultimately then to my children's lives. So I think a lot of people just, it's the old adage of they want to put you in a box and you need to fit in that box. And when you don't, people are very confused. And when people aren't familiar with something, they immediately reject it.
Yeah.
So,
And it's showing up as your best self for your family
yeah.
is so important. It's this concept of how do you do that without pouring into your own cup to a degree? Like if you're always on empty, and if you aren't allowed to do the things that really ignite a passion in you, for in your own right, how do you show up as the best version of yourself for your family?
Right. And how do you keep that feeling of, like, from turning into resentment too? Like, I think that a lot of women that experience a ton of burnout are like a little bit resentful that they aren't able to move past that, like, fear of judgment or, just fear of being perceived as selfish. Um, I think it becomes resentment if we don't address it. And you're doing something so positive for yourself, and somehow we can still feel so selfish for that. But in reality, it's like, no, I have to be strong. Like, there's no, I don't have a choice. And I think that when we take better care of ourselves, we're then able to take better care of the people that we love, make better choices. We're consciously making healthy choices for them all the time. But if you're doing all of that and then not taking care of yourself, how contradictory is that realistically?
And you touched on something there. Your role, the role that strength and powerlifting has had in your life outside of the gym, because you mentioned that you need to be strong. Can you, you've posted about this on your page, but can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so my oldest has cerebral palsy. So she was born 16 weeks premature, and then we went through the NICU for 6 months, and ultimately, it was immediately after birth that they start telling you, like, a little bit of what to expect, and cerebral palsy was one of the first things that they mentioned. So that was always on our radar. And then she got an official diagnosis at 2. But it was already very apparent at that. My 2-year-old doesn't sit up, so I know that there are residuals because she had a brain bleed in the NICU just from being premature. So she has 3 affected limbs, and then she has one. Her left hand is pretty, like, she has a pretty high function in her left hand, but struggles with grabbing things with her right, and struggles with both legs. So walking is very, she uses a K walker, and there are plenty of times when she's too tired to keep going. So ultimately, like, me going to the gym when she was very small was just like, well, if I can be a little bit stronger, or every time I get a little bit stronger, Camilla can play a little longer. But now she's 12 and she is, almost my size. So it's like I need to be able to carry her. And even if I don't have to carry her all day long, we're loading in and out of the car. If she gets tired from just being at school all day and then trying to go to the grocery store, I have to be able to carry her and her walker. And, like, that's just part of our normal, and that's part of our life. So there is a need to be strong, and I think that there's an idea that strength isn't functional, but it is if you train it that way.
Again, I think that contributes to that passion of it. You're doing something that you love in support of helping someone that you love.
Yeah.
And it's interesting
what a great
too.
way. That was beautiful. That was a great way to say that. Thank you.
Yeah, I watch your story and I follow it, and I find it so inspiring. And so that's one of the reasons that I wanted to invite you to speak with me. People like to think of fitness as this superficial thing sometimes, I think, and they don't understand that it's so much more for people. I mean, for me, getting back into fitness was kind of getting back into my skin, getting back into my identity. I don't have a need to be a specific size or anything, but I feel most at home in my body when I'm an athlete.
Yeah.
And I had strayed from that. And then, working with you to get back under the bar was so critical for me to be able to have that sense of self. And whether it's feeling at home in your body, whether it's being able to help the people that are around you, or all of the above, it can play such a pivotal role. I feel like more than just, oh, I want to take a picture for Instagram. It can have such a deep meaning to it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that people do often think that, because when people think of fitness, they think of, like, a bodybuilder that they know. And little do they know that it's so much of it is just what I'm capable of. and they forget that it's not all aesthetic, which kind of goes back to what I was saying. Like, you have the opportunity, if you're in the gym long enough, you can see lots of different training styles, or you're just scrolling on Instagram and you see someone doing something that seems so ridiculous to you, but it's like, if you can look at that from a viewpoint of like, oh, I'm just not familiar with what they're training for, it would ease a lot of just the overall tension in the fitness community, I think, and kind of give us all a greater appreciation of just like, hey, if you love that movement and it's not hurting you, do that movement because you enjoy it or because it's functional. I got a lot of questions about picking up like Atlas stones, but when I started picking up the Atlas stones, my upper back strength blew up, and my stamina with carrying Camilla was like no problem. So it makes a big difference. I think people just, again, have this idea that strength isn't super functional, but you can make strength very functional, and you'd be smart to do so, I think.
That's amazing. And then as a coach, you coach athletes who then compete as well. So, I imagine that's very rewarding to see, especially female athletes that you work with, go out and compete and just show up as their best selves.
That is one of the biggest sparks, especially if you're able to be there when they're competing. Oh my gosh, it just fills your heart and soul. It is when you watch someone accomplish something that you already knew they were capable of. I mean, it sets your heart on fire. And it's not just, I think that can be spread out with not just competition. Like, I feel that way a lot of the time when I'm in the studio, and it's almost more rewarding sometimes because I also manage a HIIT studio here locally. And so they're two very different kinds of fitness, right? Powerlifting versus like HIIT training. But those women a lot of them are focused on weight loss, and a lot of them are just there to be healthier. But when you see somebody do like a box jump for the first time, like both of their feet have never left the ground, they've never really done anything athletic in their life, and you get to witness that moment, I mean, it is the coolest thing to watch someone become proud of themselves. And then from that moment, watching their confidence just skyrocket because they recognize what they're capable of.
Yeah, and I think that, in a lot of ways, women in particular, we can be a little bit self-limiting, right? Like, I don't know if I can lift that much, or I don't want to lift that much because I don't want to get too big. And it's like, there's these misconceptions about women where it's like, you're not going to turn into the Incredible Hulk overnight if you pick up a 10-pound dumbbell. It just doesn't work that way. And I see these posts online sometimes, and it kind of cracks me up where it's like, oh, I don't want to pick up a 20-pound dumbbell, that's too much. Meanwhile, you've got your 30-pound toddler and you've got 40 pounds worth of groceries that you carry in every day.
I say it every day, Marilyn. I wish people understood that better, because they'll reach, in the studio oftentimes, they're reaching for 20s. I'm like, I watched you walk in here with a baby carrier in your arm and a toddler on your hip. Where is the disconnect? You lift more than this all the time. It's just that when it's dumbbell shaped, you're suddenly going to turn into Arnold.
Yeah.
Make it make sense.
Yeah, there's, I think, definitely a long way to go as far as this disconnect between strength and femininity that inherently cannot be strong while also being feminine. It's a disservice that's done to women when there is that dichotomy of you either can be feminine or you can be strong.
Right.
It's like, no, you can be both and you can be a badass.
Strong, and there's no in between. And then the people will make exceptions in a weird way for like some outliers. They're like, oh, except, but there's always a but. Yeah, she's okay, but like, okay, what do you mean okay? Like, physically she feels okay? What are you trying to say? But when you try to call that out, then immediately it's met with resistance and you're a crazy feminist and, yada, yada, yada. But it's like, no, I'm not something that you can rank, and my ability to do these things can't be taken away because you don't like it. So perhaps some soul searching is in order,
Yeah. I wanted to ask you what it was the most, I guess, prideful or most exciting moment that you've had so far in your powerlifting career, like a moment that you think back on it and you're like, wow.
That would have to be when I pull. I was having a lot of hip issues, so I had to switch my stance from sumo to conventional. And conventional is notoriously harder for me. My back, I have a lot of lumbar issues, and then I just have a weaker back than everywhere else. So switching, I was already nervous about to compete in that stance. I knew that I had a pretty big gap as far as strength between the two of those, and I missed my second attempt deadlift, which would have been 400, and I had pulled, it was 407,
Wow.
which I'd pulled 400 in the gym, so I was fairly confident that I would hit that and then some. So I missed that second attempt at 407. So I was actually mad about it. I was like, I cannot believe that you did that. I had I had a quad tear on my squat that day, so it was like, you're going to, I made the commitment to finish that day. So I'm like, it's just a little pain. It's not going to kill you. Get through this, and then we can address the damage when we're done. In the third attempt, I took the same weight again and got it. And I just had to sit down, and I sat down right next to the platform so that I was ready as soon as as soon as everyone went. And I just closed my eyes and visualized that lift over and over and over in my mind. And I knew that I was just a little too close to the bar. So I just made some small adjustments and came back, and it just felt like grit. I'm like, my quad is on fire. It's torn. My lower back is wrecked because of the way that I attempted the second one. Everything hurts, but I'm already committed to it. It just felt like grit, and it was so good. And we finished it off 3 white lights, and that was the end of the day, thankfully, because I think I might have fallen apart otherwise. but it was really
Yeah, I mean, it's that adrenaline, and then I feel like there's such a big part of it that is mental. You can easily just psych yourself out. When I was in high school, there was a coach that I really respected, and he was walking by as I was doing a box jump, and I was like, oh, I really want to, I want to nail this one. And I got so psyched out that I tried to jump, but I ended up jumping forward into the box and doubled over the box. Like, this is a
the toes caught.
jump that I've made 50 times before, no problem. And I got in the mental game, just got me in that moment. So it's when you're talking about coming prepared mentally and going over it in your head, I feel like that really resonates with me.
Yeah, that I think people tend to underestimate visualization and how important it is, especially on meet day. And I'm usually a gamer on meet day. My day pulls together. I can show up and kind of grind through whatever I need to. But so it was just a slap in the face to me because I was very confident. But that ability to just sit and visualize a successful lift over and over, I think everyone thinks of it as this cheesy thing. But I think it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Typically at your meets, are your daughters there? How do they interact with your life as a power lifter?
So I will take them if they want to come now, because they're 10 and 12 now. And a lot of times, to be quite honest, it's a lot for Camilla because there's so much. There's music, really loud music. There's loud banging. There's loud talking. There's so much stimulation. And she's got a lot of sensory issues with cerebral palsy. She's just sensory processing disorder. So it becomes too much for her. So when I was married, JR would bring them for maybe the last lift because he knew I really wanted them to be there, but it wasn't going to be an all day thing. When I first started competing, the meets were a lot shorter in the USAPL, so they were okay for an entire meet, but they're hungry and they're tired and they're cranky and they only care when mommy's on stage, so they don't want to sit there all day. So I try really hard not to make them come because I want them there, but I love when they're able to tough it out and be there. Especially if it's a deadlift only or something like that, that's a little bit easier to manage with them. I did bring them to this girls' night that we did. It was just deadlifts, and they had so much fun. And there is nothing like hearing "Go, mommy!" when you're up there. It just you're immediately invincible. And so I loved those meets that they were able to make it, but I don't like to drag them there because it's such a long day for them.
That makes sense. But I've seen a lot of content you posted about Delaney being into gymnastics now. So as a mom, how is that to see her kind of get into her own groove?
It's awesome. That's what I did as a kid. So I knew I wanted her to do some form of dance gymnastics, like something just involving, even wrestling, just something that involves just your body and you controlling your body. I think that that gives kids such a great amount of body awareness, and then they can go any direction they want, a ball sport, whatever it is, stay with gymnastics, swimming. But I always had this theory that it teaches you so much about like where you are in space, and it can just create a pretty good foundation. So her being able to experience that, and how much fun she has when she does it, she never wants to leave there. I'm convinced that she would live in that gymnastics studio if she were allowed.
That's amazing. And so the last question I had for you was, what advice would you give to young women who are just starting out and looking to explore strength training?
I would say get a good hold on the big three. Get it, and do not be afraid of compound lifts, first of all. But get a good hold on those three big lifts: squat, bench, deadlift, just as a foundation. And find strength training that you enjoy. If that, and by that I just mean, like, don't be afraid to walk up to someone who's doing something that you're unfamiliar with, if it's a good time, obviously, and ask them what they're doing and why they're doing that. And if you want to do that, then try. You don't know what you love until you know. So explore strength. Explore lots of different avenues of strength. Try different things. Don't be intimidated by something just because it's different or new or unfamiliar, because you might unlock a passion that you had no idea was within you, all because you took a chance on yourself.
That really resonates, and I think that in approaching strength, it can be so intimidating when you're new in the gym and you don't really know what you're doing. And I mean, some of the stuff that you taught me that was the most beneficial, I think, also was the accessory work. You think about being in the gym, like, I want to bench, I want to deadlift, and I want to squat, but it's also like you need to be doing the things on the side, the maintenance things, to keep your body, keep all the little muscles and ligaments healthy, so that those big movers can do what they need to do.
Exactly. Yeah. I think I think people starting out in powerlifting tend to struggle with that. Like, people who start with bodybuilding and move to powerlifting understand the importance of those small movements and those like ISO movements. And I think that when people start with powerlifting, you see a lot of just squatting and then going home, which is that whole powerlifting mentality, right? Oh, we just squat, bench, deadlift, and we don't do anything else. And now I remember being made fun of for those small movements and those little things that I did when I first started powerlifting, and everybody kind of chuckled at me for how long I would be in the gym, and then it slowly started to drift into like, oh, if you want to be an athlete, it's almost like you have to behave like an athlete and make sure that you check those small boxes and take better care of yourself and get enough sleep. So the smaller movements that help our joints and tendons and all of those little things, like actually learn how to bear load, are so important to making those big movements big.
Yeah. And I mean, I lift 5 days a week or whatever, and I want to make sure that I keep getting to do that and exploring my strength. But on the other side of that, I'm also a mom. And it's like I have to approach it in a way that I'm doing it smart. So I'm a little bit more risk averse than some because of the fact that I have 2 toddlers and there's no injured reserve.
Right.
If I mess up and hurt myself, or I'm not doing the things that I need to do to be able to do accomplish my fitness goals safely. If I come home and I'm injured, I still have two toddlers running around.
Yeah, no one cares when no one cares if my back hurts. Our kids still need bathed and dinner, and I gotta put Camilla in and out of the shower. Like, that is one thing, that's a lesson I've learned the hard way, for sure, with like lumbar issues and things like that. But, and people are always like, oh, it's selfish for you to do this because you could get hurt. And I'm like, I could get hurt walking out the front door. But also for me, I have a fusion in my lumbar spine. So it's already an issue and was my whole life. And I have strengthened to this point, and it has made my quality of life even better. So I'm like, I think it's one of those things where, because people have a certain experience themselves, or plenty of people have tried lifting and gotten hurt, so they have that experience one time, and instead of consulting someone or working through it or figuring out how to work around it, they just cut it off, and then they put that blanket statement of being or lifting weights is going to get you hurt. And I find that, especially with men, a lot of the time, that they make that blanket statement, especially older men, and they're like, you're gonna be so mad at yourself when you're older. I'm like, okay, but I don't think that I am, because when I can still pick her up in 10 years, I don't think I'm gonna be mad that I took the time to be this strong.
Yeah. Well, especially for women too, because of the risks of osteoporosis and things like that. It's like resistance training, strength training is so important in so many ways to being able to avoid some of those maladies. Again, it's one of those situations where I think women in particular, it's like we do a disservice by saying, oh, avoid this or only do that. And like you said, putting women in a box and saying these types of movements or this type of exercise is for women and this type is not.
You know what? I think I learned so much and did so well because when I first started, when I was still literally just learning to lift, I lifted primarily with men who did not treat, I mean, it was only men. And the strength and conditioning class that I took, it was me and one other girl, but they never treated us any different. We ran the same program as the boys in there, and we made the same jumps and made the same successful progress, and it's because they didn't try to water it down. They treated us exactly the same. You rack your weights, you unrack your weights yourself. There was no princess, no treatment, no frills, and that made such, I think that didn't make a difference yet because I wasn't aware of it, but it shaped so much of my lifting journey because I wasn't treated as if I didn't belong there. And I think it's really important as women to never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong in a weight room or doing whatever you want to do realistically. But as it applies here, don't let anyone make you feel like your training is somehow not as valuable as theirs. And when you walk in like that, humbly, of course, we don't want to be a jerk. But I walk in like I belong there because I do. And I think that that's really important for women to understand. Their workout is no more important than yours just because they're stronger than you are. Show up like you belong there because you do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's that ability for us to be able to take up space. Even in different phases of life, like when I was pregnant, because I lifted from the beginning all the way to 38, 39 weeks pregnant, and the number of like unsolicited comments based in zero science that I would get about the fact that I was weightlifting. And it's like I would have to explain to people, I'm like, my doctor knows that I'm lifting. They told me that as long as I don't start something crazy that I wasn't doing beforehand, that I'm totally fine. And it's just, but they see a pregnant woman and they see a pregnant woman exercising with weight and they freak out. Yes. And it's like, to your point, it's like, I'm intelligent. I have consulted with my doctors. I belong here. I am pregnant. I'm also still allowed to take up space and do the things that I love to do. There's no reason I can't. Yeah.
I exist behind this belly.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think that goes back to the point at the very beginning, which is people immediately start telling you what you should do with your body. They immediately start forming opinions about how you are, caring for your baby, even when they're still inside you. And it's crazy because it's like you have no idea what my injury history, my medical history, any of that is. You're just making an assumption. And that's crazy that you would then give me advice. Because make an assumption, that's fine. but those are inside thoughts. Because what happens is, I think over a long period of time, we've all kind of internalized that, and oh my gosh, I can't do that because what will people think? Well, what will people think? Who cares?
Yeah. I find that that's just such a through line for all of your messaging, and it's so empowering. And I feel like you're one of those people where when I talk to you or when I see your content, it always fills my cup. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me and talk to me and just share your journey and your knowledge and wisdom.
Thank you so much, Mara. That makes my heart happy. Thank you.
Well, I think that's going to do it for us today on the You've Got This Girl podcast, and tune in next time for some more.